Good morning, everyone. I think you can all hear me very clearly. If there's any problem, please send a message on the chat box so that we can try to figure out what the problem is. So depending on what time zone you are in, because we have people from China, from Malaysia, from different parts of the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you are in. My name is Farazan Ali. I'm an assistant professor at College of Hospitality and Tourism Leadership at University of South Florida, Sarasota, Manatee. I'm also working as an assistant editor and coordinating editor for hospitality top tier journals. In addition, my today's role here would be a moderator for this session, but I'm also acting as a director of research methods and statistics for ANAHEI. Now, those of you who are already on this webinar, I assume most of you already are aware of ANAHEI, but those who are not aware of ANAHEI, I'll quickly tell you what ANAHEI is. So ANAHEI, it's a non-profit organization, and we have taken this initiative. The initiative was a brainchild of Dr. Jehan Chobanoglu. What we wanted to do was to have a platform where we could promote and encourage global culture at member institutes and have different type of initiatives in order to disseminate and spread out knowledge for free for people to enhance their knowledge and their skills and stuff like that. Now, what we do at ANAHEI, there are different things. So the first thing is research in 3 minutes. It's sort of a 3-minute thesis competition where people convert their thesis or their research into a 3 minutes video presentation. We'll have a first competition for it very soon. The details are on the website, where the winner would also get some sort of a prize. So please visit anahei.org to get the details for that. We also run different visiting scholar programs where we invite people here in the US or any of the other member institutes to go and indulge into research activities. Now, there are 2 journals which ANAHEI is running. One of them is IIBA Journal. The other one is Journal of Global Education and Research. IIBA is mainly for business and economics and stuff like that. ANAHEI also organizes multiple conferences over the year. So, I mean, we have multiple conferences, 4 to 5 conferences every year. The next conferences which are coming up are in Sarasota. There's a week which will have 4 conferences, and you can attend all 4 of them by paying only 1 registration fee. So again, the details are on the website. In addition, we do have different webinars and lecture series. So one of them is sort of a methodology related webinars. Today's webinar, which is related to literature review, is also part of the methodology webinar series. Then another webinar series we have is distinguished lectures series, and we invite people from top tier business schools and top tier management schools to come and talk about their research or some of the hot burning issues these days we are facing. Again, I would say if you are interested in any of these, please go to anahei.org and you will find all these different type of details on the website. For the webinars, for those of you who cannot attend in full, we'll have the recording of the webinar available online. We do have multiple streaming channels. So, I mean, right now we have multiple Facebook accounts which are streaming this webinar live. We also put the recording online so that if you want to share it with your students, with your colleagues, you can definitely do that. Okay, so for today's webinar, it's about literature review. I'll just go back and introduce the speaker first before I talk about what she is going to talk about. And obviously, I'll not talk in detail so that I do not take much of Dr. Farazan, what she is going to talk about later on. So Dr. Farazan is an associate professor at Azman Hashim International Business School. And I'm very proud today she's talking because Azman Hashim International Business School is my alma mater, and there's where I got my PhD from. And right when I was studying for my PhD, Dr. Farazan was recruited there, and we had some good discussions over the years on different type of things. She's an active researcher, and she also managed to secure several research grants. She has won different type of awards related to her research, related to teaching, grants and stuff like that. She's very active in supervising master's and PhD students as well, and her students also have received multiple awards. Now, Dr. Farazan is sort of, in my opinion, a qualitative researcher, but she also do a lot of quantitative research, especially structural equation modeling and partial least squares. She has written multiple books. One of her book, which recently was published by Pearson Malaysia, was Crafting Literature Review, and that's sort of a guidebook for doctoral students. So I requested her once I looked at this book, I requested her if she would be willing to share her knowledge with the audience all over the world through this webinar, and she was very humble and very polite, and she graciously accepted this offer. Dr. Farazan has published 40 research articles in different journals, and her research interest includes consumer behavior, services marketing, green marketing, and work ethics and values. A little bit about today's webinar. So today's webinar is basically about literature review, whether you are doing it for your doctoral thesis or dissertation, or you're doing it for a paper publication or anything. It's similar to me with all the other people I know. A lot of them are very much scared or overwhelmed by writing the literature review section. So I think that today's webinar would really provide some guidance to perform a constructive review of the literature, and should also provide us some common tips to avoid mistakes that usually examiners spot in writing of the students. And I would say that it would also apply in journal article writing, where reviewers would spot these issues in the literature review. Being said that, I would also say that there's another webinar coming very soon, and that is on February 22nd. We'll have Dr. Anil, he is the Dean, and John W. Berry, Chair in Business, the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business, and he is going to talk about the middle market. So you can mark your calendars. I would really urge you to attend this webinar. It would be a very interesting webinar to increase your knowledge and about the middle market. One last thing, since today's webinar is about literature review, I would also highlight another special issue we are going to have for Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Technology. This journal is published by Emerald Publishers. It's indexed in Scopus and Emerging Sciences Citation Index, and we are very hopeful that very soon it will be indexed in Social Sciences Citation Index. The special issue focuses on the progress on information technology and hospitality and tourism. So we are looking at literature review, meta-analysis, and review papers on different topics related to information technology and hospitality and tourism. So I would urge you to go to the website of Journal of Hospitality, Tourism and Technology and see if you can contribute anything to this special issue. For any other details, you are more than welcome to visit the website. If you have any questions about ANAHEI, or if you wanted to become a member, or if you wanted to conduct a webinar or whatever, you are more than welcome to send me an email, and we'll be happy to discuss that further with you. Being said that, I will ask Dr. Farazan to continue from here. I'll make her the host, and we'll let talk about her topic now. Thank you very much.
Okay, so shall I share my screen?
Yes, please. Yes, Dr. Farazan, you are more than welcome to share your screen, PowerPoint slides or whatever you have, and we'll go ahead from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Farazan, for your nice description and having me here. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity to share some sort of, my experience and knowledge.
Sorry, I would just interrupt you here for one small moment. We have around 68 participants in the webinar right now. So around 68 people are attending it right now. We most probably will have some more people coming and joining in or leaving. But for the attendees, if they have any questions, I would add all those questions onto a slide, or I'll just store them with me. And whenever you take a break after 15-20 minutes, I'll ask some of those questions and you can answer them. Is that okay?
Oh, sure, no problem at all. Even you can ask me when I have to stop to, respond to those queries.
Sure. And you can also see there's a chat panel. If you can see on your side, there would be a chat panel. So sometimes people ask their questions or they type their questions into the chat panel. So you can also see there if you wanted to answer throughout, like while talking.
Okay. Maybe it would be better if I talk for a while and then we can have a discussion time. Yes, right.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll mute my mic and I'll let you continue with your talk. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Farazan. Okay, right. Okay, so already Dr. Farazan introduced me. So I'm Farzana. I'm an associate professor at Azman Hashim International Business School, University of Technology, Malaysia. And this is some links that you can find more about me, about my research and my publications. Well, today I'm going to talk about crafting literature review. Actually, this is a very important topic for those who are pursuing their PhD, for those who are actually doing masters by research, and also for those who are interested to write in journal article or writing already for the journal article. This is actually crucial and unavoidable. However, sometimes, students, even the writers, even we ourselves sometimes feel like uncomfortable, a little bit overwhelming, and sometimes, difficult job to do. Why it is so uncomfortable? Perhaps because this is very subjective in nature, and maybe because, there's no specific structure of writing literature review. And also it is not like something like so objective like running a software like Amos, PLS, or Spaces. Is quite subjective. Another thing is that sometimes different supervisors, different examiners, different reviewers, they may have also different kind of expectations from this literature review write-up. So those things make us a little bit uncomfortable. Well, though it is uncomfortable and though it is sometimes very much subjective in nature, there are certain common rules and there are certain common expectations that we're supposed to follow. Well, that's the thing I'm trying to share with you. I'm not an expert, of course, but I can say that I'm an advanced learner. Why I'm advanced learner? Because I gone through the experience during my doctoral dissertation, and then I saw my colleagues, my fellow classmates, their process, how they gone through, and then now I actively supervise master's and PhD and DB students. I write and I review, I manage my grants, and also I examine the doctorate thesis. So I'm trying to share you my knowledge and experience, maybe not to vast extent, a little bit, quite the basics, so that it will give you just like eye-opening, and then of course you have to read other books, and the key is to write a good literature is read and write, read and write, and again read and write. Well, let's start with a small discussion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about introductory thing like what is literature review, why it is needed, and then I'll move on discussing few tips. I mean, when we want to have it effective literature review, so what are the aspects we should take care of? Well, since it's just 1 hour discussion altogether, so I didn't try to make a lot of issues to discuss. So I tried to pinpoint certain matters only that can be discussed within 1 hour. And also I'll try to highlight a little bit about common mistakes that the students make when they're writing literature review chapter. Okay. So what is literature review and why it is needed? So actually it has a big discussion, and it has quite a lot of numbers of definitions around the world. Well, I actually picked up 2 definitions that I felt that is actually quite big enough and giving the broader aspect of the understanding about the issue. So one is Hart. It's my very favorite book, 1998. So Hart stated that literature review is the selection of available documents, both published and unpublished, on the topic which contain information, ideas, data, and evidence written from a particular standpoint to fulfill certain aims or express certain views on the nature of the topic and how it is to be investigated, and the effective evaluation of these documents in relation to the research being proposed. Another definition is by Cooper, 2010. Literature reviews can attempt to integrate what others have done and said, to criticize previous scholarly works, to build bridges between related topic areas, and or to identify the central issues in a field. Okay, those are actually, you can find any books actually. So let's look at your doctoral thesis or dissertation or master's thesis, or for example, even it's a journal article. We have introduction, we have literature review, and we have methodology. This is a common format almost. So during the introduction chapter, what is supposed to discuss, there can be different actually patterns, but commonly what we do, we discuss about the study background. We identify the research problem, we pose question or we have objective to solve that problem, and we establish the significance of the study. So there can be some other elements, of course, but this is the common. Next is actually what we do, we actually review the literature. So what we do exactly here, we actually try to understand who have studied this problem and issues before, what they have found, what is still not known, what are the existing school of thoughts, and where those studies stand among these different schools. Methodology is quite pretty straightforward. That is basically finding and looking the methods how to solve that problem, right? Okay. So based on these 5 questions that we just saw, what is supposed to do? So let me explain a little bit. So who have studied this problem or issue before? So actually you have to read the existing and relevant literature, because without reading we do not know actually who have studied it before and what they have found. So actually you have to summarize and synthesize the existing knowledge based on the review of those articles. Now, what is still not known? So then you have to critically review those existing literature, and you have to find the research gap. And what are the existing school of thoughts? Most of the time it happens that we have different traditions of understanding and views that we call different school of thoughts. So being an researcher, actually we need to highlight all those different school of thought, and then we also need to criticize if needed. And why the studies stand among these different schools? Actually, you have to draw a conclusion and justify your stance. It's not enough just to explain all those school of thought. You also, need to have your own stand, and you need to have concluding remarks. Otherwise, it will be like left hanging discussion. So that's why we said that, so what? So you have to also answer the so-called so what question. I'm not so sure, maybe many of you already are being asked about this question from either supervisor or by examiners or reviewers, that often they say that, okay, very good, you would explain so many things, however, we do not know why we need to know it. So that's the thing, we need to make a conclusion and you need to tell your reader that where you stand. Well, based on that, actually, we can quickly, summarize that actually to be an effective literature review, what are the things we need to focus on? First, it comes that selection of documents. So I assume that all of you have your research problem already. You have particular phenomenon of interest. So once you know your phenomenon of interest or topic of your particular research, then actually you have to have selection of documents. And then once you have selection of documents, then actually you need to have reading, download the materials, start reading, summarize and synthesize, and not only synthesize but also critically read and write, finding the research gap. And also, please do not forget to pay attention to the academic writing style, and you have to avoid plagiarism. Let's just talk a little bit about all those things a little bit. So when you talk about selection of documents or source, so there are plenty of sources around the world. So Saunders et al., according to Saunders et al., it can have primary sources, it can have secondary sources. So primary sources are actually those that, for example, company reports, unpublished thesis, conference proceedings, working paper, and so on and so forth. Most of the time, these kind of primary sources are a little bit difficult to obtain, and that's why we call them actually gray literature. We also have secondary sources. Those are easy to locate. For example, published books, journals, newspaper, available government publications, and so on and so forth. So these are the things your university is supposed to have the subscription, and then you're supposed to be able to download those articles. And also for books, there are plenty of online books you can just buy from Amazon, or you can go to the bookstores. So those are the secondary sources. So it happens that sometimes we may need combination of both kind of sources, and sometimes maybe you can also just write your paper or your research articles based on secondary sources. So again, it depends on the need of your research and style of research writing. So sometimes some of this supervisor may tell you that they want you to avoid primary sources and great literature, maybe because they want you to just focus on those scholarly journals and published books. So again, you have to follow the system and the requirement posed by your university or your supervisor or the particular journal article. Well, second is, once you have sources, you have to download, of course, your relevant and important articles and whatever materials, and you need to read. I must say, I like to say it exhaustively. What do I mean by exhaustively? Actually, for me, it's like this, that this is a saturation point. A saturation point whereby you will feel that you read, and after you read a lot, you are downloading different article, you are looking at it, and you're realizing that you already know something somewhere before. So it is not adding new knowledge. And it is also the point where you feel that you're very confident actually to talk about what you read, and you're confident about the particular phenomenon of interest. So anyone can ask you, and you are comfortable to respond or answer their question. So that is the things I mean by exhaustively. Well, of course, it's up to you how much exhaustive you want to be. So again, it is very important. Why it is important? There's few reasons. For example, if you are not reading properly, then actually your understanding of the phenomenon will be incomplete. Incomplete meaning you will not see the full picture. You know only the part of it. You do not know other part of it. You know maybe the hand and legs, but you don't know about the heads and back. So that's why you need to read a lot. Without exhaustive reading, you cannot claim that there is a research gap, and that's another danger. Let's say, for example, if we're talking about loyalty kind of phenomenon, and then it actually, more than 100 years of studies, literature, and then you want to find out the gap by reading only 20 articles. It's very dangerous, because actually what you're thinking it is gap, maybe it is not a gap at all. Perhaps some other researcher already dig down it and answer or fulfill this gap already. So that's another thing, that we need to read properly, thoroughly, so that the gap you're highlighting is really meaningful. Another thing is that your review may miss certain important literature to be discussed. So when you are focusing on very selective numbers of articles, very focused, and then actually sometimes we missed out with certain other, valuable and important information. And that's also not good for you, because you of course want to prove yourself as an established and well-capable researcher. You will have lack of confidence about your claim and justification. Most of the time what happens is that I do not know about all, but I saw sometimes then during the examination board, and then the students, if they have really lack of understanding of the issue, or if they have lack of reading, when examiners ask them something, they really cannot answer well, because they are not confident by themselves. So those are the things. There can be many more. So, but these are four basic things I feel that therefore we need to read properly, thoroughly, and exhaustively. Well, of course, you need to also remember two things. Those are the two constraints. For example, the aim for reviewing the literature. So you're reviewing this literature for whom or for what purpose? Is it for your journal articles? Is it for thesis or research grant? Why you need to know? Because let's say you are working on 6 months to come up with a research article and you have to submit to a journal. Then of course, you cannot be too thorough. I mean, you have to look at your time. And if you're looking for example, you're doing literature review for a doctoral dissertation, then maybe you're thinking for 3 years time. So of course you have sufficient plenty of time to dig down and review the literature thoroughly. So those are the things also we need to a little bit consider, but there's no shortcut, of course. And another thing is available time. Okay, so whatever constraint it is, there shouldn't be any shortcut in doing research, because shortcut will never give you quality. Right. Another thing is that what to read. This is very important. So as I said to you that of course sometimes there are times you need to look at primary sources, but most of the time for thesis and for, I'm not talking about science, I'm talking basically social science, marketing, management, this kind of thing. And when you're writing for scholarly journal articles, then basically reviewers, examiners, supervisors, they want you to read from scholarly journal articles. You need to also read pioneer articles. Pioneer articles meaning the people, they actually maybe incepted the concept, they built the concept. You need to know who are the started these issues in the literature. For example, if you're referring to loyalty, then of course I have to also read the literature from 1940s when it incepted by Churchill, Guest. I also need to read, of course, the latest articles. And why? Because I need to know the recent trend and the recent development of the issues and phenomena. What are the things already studied? What are the things people are looking forward? Also, you need to read milestone articles. Each discipline or each topic, most of the time there are certain milestone articles. What is milestone articles? There are certain people or certain articles, certain researchers, they write certain issues pertaining to that phenomenon that creates some sort of revolutionary understanding for others. For example, since I'm talking about loyalty, there are very good milestone articles given by Deacon Basu about loyalty typology. Then there are very good articles about multidimensional loyalty, that is actually Jacobi and, if I'm not mistaken, Keener. They given the definition. And then there are a lot of plenty like this. So these are the things you also need to read. Don't be so focused. Don't just narrow down your reading. Read relevant books, of course. Books also give a lot of understanding. Find top-tier journals of your own discipline. That's very important. Each discipline, they have their top-tier journals. So you have to, as an active researcher, you need to know what are those top-tier journals in your field. Try to avoid blogs because those are not scholarly. Try to avoid citing from unpublished theses because theses actually do not go through the review process. Blind review process, it doesn't go through unless it is very important and very crucial and very much relevant for you. Try to avoid citing from unpopular conference proceedings. There are a lot of conferences going on around the world nowadays, but it's good to go and get exposure. That's of course most welcome, but it's dangerous if you want to quote and cite from those kind of conferences without judging the worth of those conferences. Many conferences even, I'm so sorry to say that even the review process is not thorough. It's just, you can pay and you can go. I'm not saying all conferences like that. There are of course very good conferences also that they even reject, even you want to pay, they will reject your papers if it is not up to the mark. So be careful about conference proceedings, and also try to avoid not dated references because not dated references are not authentic. So anyone can just put it online and put there in bracket not dated. Well, there are certain, of course, papers that very, very old, and then for example Rabia Basri or Hassan Basri, this kind of people, of course you may not find certain date, but most of the time we need to be careful and avoid those kind of references. Well, when you're reading a lot of articles and you have plenty of, let's say for example you have a framework and conceptual framework where you have 4 or 5 variables and you're reading a lot of articles about each variables, and then you need to know how to strategize your all those, articles. So there's a very good way of, strategizing your all those reading and all those ideas in mapping them. So this is very common tips by all, I think, most of the researchers who write about literature review books. Well, there are a lot of new softwares, like, you can use Mendeley, you can use NVivo. So those are the things also good for, let's say you want to have a keywords, you just type the keywords and what are the relevant articles, they'll pop up. But it's not like that. It's mapping your ideas. Ideas meaning you have, when you're reading, certain ideas you're developing and you want to map those ideas while you're reading. So what happens is that those are the things can give you later on, actually, like mind mapping things. Sometimes it helps to generate new ideas, and sometimes it helps to just, organize your thought process. So Hart actually suggested that there can be not only Hart, several other researchers I combine. I cannot recall who and who other than Hart. So altogether, actually, you can have different kind of mapping. One is relationship map, another is subject relevance tree, concept mapping, taxonomy maps, and summary record sheet. So I'm not going to detail. So this is an example of relationship map I taken from Hart. So here he actually trying to portray one example that how we can have, understanding by reviewing the literature, and we can have a map of relationship among the variables and the phenomenon. It also can have subject relevance tree. Then this is example of concept mapping. So he plotted here several kind of concept. This taxonomy, so classifications, it was about a passenger car, and then their classification you can see here. What I love basically is summary table, so summary record sheet. This is simple template. Of course, you can have your own way of doing it. You can change it. You can, add on. You can delete whatever. But this is quite useful. Why it is useful? You do it in Excel sheet even. So once you write down here every single thing, but please be specific and write in concise form. Don't try to elaborate too much. Well, so this is the things later on when you have, you want to look at certain important journals, or you can have common one column about comment. So you can have comment there, and then you can look back again if you think that this article is good for methodology, this article good for dimensionality, this article good for so and so forth. Well, most of the time what happens is that sometimes examiners, sometimes supervisors, they love to see this kind of, summary table in your write-up. For example, if you're talking about, let's say your main phenomenon of interest of your article is like loyalty, brand loyalty, or service loyalty, or whatever. So then you also may have some other variables in your framework. So when you are writing your literature review chapter and we're specifically talking about that particular phenomenon, then actually you can have a table and you can have a concise form of this table. Of course, if it is too huge, put it in the appendix. Don't try to put it inside the text. But you can be selective of picking up certain milestone articles and show that you did a good job. If you look at journal articles, there are certain journal articles you'll find a lot of this kind of tables, but not necessarily exactly in this way. You can just take certain parts, what you feel that valuable and relevant for you, and you can just place it there where it is needed. For example, these articles in this table, they're showing that different kind of network quality, mobile quality, and then the example. Here, another table, it is showing that different kind of dimensionality of loyalty. This is composite loyalty, attitudinal and behavioral, and there are many more. You can find it plenty. It shows that actually how systematic you are in actually, mapping your articles and mapping your ideas. Well, it's up to you again. So next is the things that once you read your articles and all those relevant materials, then you need to know how to summarize and how to synthesize. These two are very important things for literature review. So summary actually is, I must say that sometimes we read certain students write up, even sometimes some manuscript when you review, we just see that it's just barely reporting facts. It's just like newspaper writing. But I must say that writing for, scholarly writing for publication or for your thesis or dissertation, It has to go beyond of that. It's not only writing report that who has done what. It's not like that. You have to actually summarize it in clear and concise manner. That's the main point, clear and concise manner. Another thing is that once you summarize many articles, and then when you have plenty of articles and understanding is developed, matured enough, then you will be able to synthesize it. You cannot synthesize without reading several articles, because synthesis meaning you're putting together your understanding on the whole. So, for example, here is written that to integrate a number of different pieces into a whole, making sense of existing literature and finding research gap, build bridges between related topic areas, making recommendation and connecting practices to the research, and etc. So actually it goes beyond us only summarizing. And that's the thing as a scholar, as academic writing style, you have to adopt that. You have to know how to synthesize your understanding. Well, there is one example. This is my favorite example. Sometimes in my workshop, in my class, I also show this example. So this is one example actually taken from one student, and that student actually written about mobile phone service and the loyalty satisfaction issues. So if you read carefully these 3 paragraphs, then you will find that it is actually talking about the same thing again and again in each paragraph. So first paragraph, they are talking about Ahon et al. And Chuang 2011, that in the mobile context, what they have found. And then they found that actually that satisfaction positively affects loyalty. And next paragraph, it is actually referring to Bansal and Taylor, 1999, and it is saying that also they found a satisfaction lead to loyalty, but in different service industry, that is not mobile phone, this is financial service industry. And in the last paragraph, it is saying that actually Chin et al. 2008, that satisfied customers do not exhibit loyalty all the time. So actually, this is like, you're explaining one article in one paragraph. Maybe it is looking quite nice, but actually if you think carefully, this is not nicely written summary or synthesis at all, because you can just have maybe one paragraph maximum and you can synthesize saying that Ahn et al., Chuang and Taylor and Bansal and Taylor, they found that satisfaction led to loyalty in different service contexts. On the other hand, Chin et al. 2008 didn't find it, substantiate the result. That's it. So the issue is here, if you are trying to explain one single article in each paragraph, then actually you are not writing literature review, you are going to write an epic. Because of course you have to review 50, 60, 100 or maybe sometimes more than that articles. So what we're aiming for is actually concise and simple and clear presentation of fact and synthesizing your understanding and put together and make sense out of it. Well, it's not easy, of course, but research is something like you have to work on it all the time. It's not that you will gain overnight. So if you're trying and you are trying from your heart, you are reading and writing continuously, of course you can do that. Well, the another important thing is that read and write critically. So the question is, what does it mean by reading critically or reviewing critically? So being critical doesn't mean that you have to talk nasty or you have to be negative or you have to consciously search for any. Is there any question? Excuse me.
Yes, Dr. Farazan, thank you for what you are doing so far. It's all wonderful. So we have a couple of questions. One of the attendees actually asked if you can please explain synthesis again. And then there are a couple of more questions which are on the chat panel on the side. So,
okay,
yeah, if you...
where I can find those questions?
Okay, so right below down, if you take your mouse cursor where you can see screen, right by the side you will see icon chat.
Uh, okay, I am trying. I don't know exactly. I can't
Yeah.
chat.
Okay. All right. Are you able to see the icon called chat?
I can't get chat.
You can see the chat down, right? Right below, like if you look at your where you use icon for share screen.
Icon for share screen.
Yeah, by the side of share screen, you will see an icon called chat. Okay, so if you cannot see it, I'll repeat the question for you.
Yeah.
So question number one is, okay, so the question number one is, if we cannot find any relevant references and relevant literature, let's suppose if it's a new area, what can be done then?
It's a new area and not much references are found. Is it the question?
Yes, yes, that's the question. Yes.
Okay, let's go one by one. So actually, if sometimes it happens, it may happen that we are working on something new topic or something actually quite comparatively new. So actually, for example, usually what we do, usually in this case, you can go for qualitative study. So qualitative study itself can create certain ground for you, and then you can move on based on that qualitative study. But again, certain times it happens that we are looking for very focused area. For example, let's say I'm actually marketing, lecturers. So when I moved to now recently, my interest is not no more about service marketing or consumer behavior. Of course, those I love still, but my focus is now green marketing. So let's say, for example, if one of my students, she was working on also green marketing, and then she is looking for the articles only green marketing. So then I must say that that is too much, narrow down to the focus. So of course, before you zoom into green marketing, you need to know a little bit about just conventional marketing. So because variables are not too different. For example, when you're talking about consumer behavior in conventional marketing scenarios, and now I'm talking about consumer behavior in green marketing. So of course, you need to read, of course, the conventional marketing aspect as well. So what I mean here that yes, sometimes if it is very new and you do not have much references, you can still talk about relevant, maybe not exactly same, but relevant. For example, I give another example. Let's say I'm talking about satisfaction. This is quite a huge literature like loyalty. And then recently we're talking about customer delight, and that is quite interesting and comparatively new. But however, you still can relate it with satisfaction. So when you're looking for the articles, of course, still you can bring some of the discussion from that customer satisfaction, but simply your explanation will be different, logical argument will be different, but almost, you can use those relevant literatures, though it is not exactly same, but it can be similar.
Okay, thank you. So there's another question, which is there a specific method to do cross-referencing? And if you cannot find chat, I'll also tell you, somebody said it on the chat, you can press Alt and H on your keyboard, so you'll be able to see the chat panel on the side.
Alt and
H.
H. I'm so sorry, Dr. Farazan. I cannot see
It's
well.
okay.
Oh,
It's okay. If
Q&A.
you can't see that, yeah, if you cannot see it, it's fine.
No, I got it. I can see 3 questions.
Yes.
One is, please explain synthesis again. And what is considered a dated reference? Okay, okay. So can I go one by one?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So dated reference, actually what I meant here, actually not dated. So most of the time you'll find that sometimes in the online there are certain articles or certain chapters or certain whatever they write there no year. Let's say I'm talking about, let's say it's me, so I can write Quoquab in bracket n.d. So that n.d. referring no year, so it is referring not dated. So if you happens to have those kind of references, so I was suggesting try to be careful, use them cautiously. Well, another one is, I have a question. Is there any difference between crafting a literature review for inductive versus a deductive research? Well, to some extent, yes, but not a gross extent. To some extent, yes, meaning, for example, if I'm referring to quantitative paradigm and then it is under basically deductive reasoning. So what's happening here, most of the time we're trying to put together relationship like A will lead to B, B will lead to C, and then come up with a framework. So on that case, actually, we have certain way of formulating hypotheses. So those actually fall under deductive reasoning. On the other hand, if you're referring to, for example, inductive reasoning, you want to do some exploratory study or some pure qualitative study, and then most of the time, actually a hypothesis is not for qualitative, but you may have proposition. So if you have proposition, even developing or postulating those proposition a little bit different in nature than hypothesis. So what happened here, only the part when we're actually trying to put together hypotheses or coming up with a conceptual framework, that is the part makes some differences. But other than that, when you're referring to, talking about your phenomenon of interest, talking about theoretical underpinning, talking about logical argument, critical review, synthesizing, all are almost same. Okay. How can I optimally search for relevant literature? How can I judge fake information? Well, a very good question and also tough question. Well, can I see the question again?
Oops. She says, how can we judge the fake information or fake?
Okay, actually you need to be very much careful about the source of publication. For example, this is something also all of us being the researcher, we have to be very aware of it, that what kind of journals we have. For example, when you're talking about index journals, there are a lot of indexing actually, but we do not care about all kind of index journals. We basically care about citation index journal. So what are the citation index journal? Basically ISI, Scopus, and ERA. So even if I'm not mistaken, many universities, I'm not so sure others, but Malaysia, they're hoping for ISI and basically Scopus, even not ERA. It depends on your university requirement. So what happened here, if you're very much well aware of those are the articles, published in those are the journals that are indexed in Scopus, indexed in ISI, then I can say that yes, you can rely on those sources, you can rely on those information. Also, you need to be careful that there are certain journals we call hijack journals, then we call predatory journals. Certain journals, those are predatory, but still it is indexed in Scopus and ISI. So you have to be alert, actually have to be very careful and all the time dig down all those latest information. We have list online available for Scopus. That list shows that delisted articles each year and new enlisted articles each year. Same goes for ISI. So we need to find out those kind of list and check your articles before you submit or before you cite and read. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Farazan. There are multiple more questions as well. I don't know how much of your slides are left. If you have a lot of the material left, then I think we can stop the questions now.
Yeah, maybe we proceed for a while, then we can again come back. But I want to answer one because that one was, I think, earlier. So please explain synthesis again. Okay, so this is the one I asked because it's I think quite earlier the question was posed. So then I move on. Okay. So synthesis basically actually, it is like when you read lot of articles or already lot of materials you have read and you have a good understanding about it, then only you can put together your understanding into a whole. So what happened here, when you're summarizing can be for individual article, it also can be for a few articles, but synthesis cannot be for only one article. It comes after reading several articles, after reading several information. Only then you can see the picture and you can put together that, okay, so now I have an idea and I can have conclusion. I can find certain loopholes in the literature, and I can also have an understanding of different school of thought. I can see myself where I am standing. So that is the thing, synthesis. So it goes beyond of all those, summarizing each individual articles. It's put together your understanding and your ideas. So maybe we move on first, and then again we can, wait for a while and just try to answer some of your question. Okay, as Dr. Farazan suggested. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so. Well, so I was talking about being critical, right? So what happened is here that basically three things, if I simplify. Of course, there are a lot more, but just for simplification purpose, when you're reading certain materials, certain texts or documents, basically we try to find out the strength and the weakness of that particular text. We also try to understand whether that particular text is adding any value to our knowledge. And also another very crucial thing, I think already I answered half of it, that whether the information is reliable or not. So those few things we really need to take care of, and that is the thing, create our critical mind, critical reading, and then we can write perhaps critically. So for example, if you look at this example, tourism plays a significant role for the economy of British Columbia. In 2012, the tourism industry generated $13.5 billion in revenue, blah, blah, blah. This I taken from a manuscript. So what happened here, the question is, who said so? There are a lot of information and numbers and years, but actually no proper references are cited. So there is lack of credibility. So that is one of the simple example that sometimes, the information we're reading, there may be lack of credibility because there are not much citation. So we do not know this information is coming from the author's head. Is it anecdotal evidences or there are certain ground? Okay. Another thing is that why we need to be critical in review. There are a lot of reasons, but I take this from Wallace and Ray, 2011. They said that to further refine research questions and research objective, to discover recommendations for future research, to avoid repeating work already undertaken, finding the research gap, and to provide insight into strategies and technique appropriate to your research questions and objectives. So there are a lot of things that actually we can do by just being critical. You will never find a gap unless you review critical, I'm telling you. Well, one example of critically written text, it's too long, but just at a glance. Although loyalty phenomenon has been studied since the last 8 decades, little emphasis has been given to MBL, multi-brand loyalty. So this is started with critically criticizing actually the sentence. Jacobi and Olson and Jacobi began to explore the notion of multi-brand loyalty during 1970s. Both of these studies were exploratory in nature and not meant to understand the specific antecedents of multi-brand loyalty. This example actually showing simultaneously critical writing and as well as synthesis. So if you read this paragraph, you can see that actually you cannot write this paragraph unless and until you read exhaustively, unless and until you know how to put together all those thoughts in one paragraph. So let's move on. The focus of the former research was to highlight the importance of studying multi-brand loyalty along with sole brand loyalty, whereas the latter study proposed the measures of multi-brand loyalty based on expectancy value model, social judgment theory, and Bradley-Terrace-Lewis scaling. Additionally, based on a longitudinal study of 66 families in his famous articles, Brand Loyalty, What, Where, How Much, Cunningham concluded that these families exhibit divided loyalties. And so on and so then. However, not many studies have examined this construct. In a relatively recent study, Moore and Shekhon 2005 had examined the relevance of multi-brand loyalty card scheme. It is important to note that all of these studies' focus was physical product, ignoring the service aspect. Moreover, it is not clearly understood why consumers become multi-brand loyal within a particular service category. In addition to those, it is necessary to understand the clear partition among sole brand loyalty, multi-brand loyalty, and switching construct in the counter services. Hence, taking this gap into consideration, the present study tries to gain a deeper knowledge regarding these issues. So as I said, this example actually I taken just because to tell you that it is actually one kind of example for critical writing, also for synthesis, and also showing how you can tell your reader where is your stand. So last sentence referring actually your stand. Okay, this is I've taken from one of my articles. It is, I think, multi-brand loyalty, qualitative inquiry. Well, let's move on. So next is that we need to highlight and find out the research gap. So what is research gap? So Zygmunt said that this is the deficiency in the literature. So what is the, how can we find it? So when we read articles, then we already know that, certain things already we know. So what is examined so far in the existing literature? So already know the answer. But what is not studied yet, that also come to our mind, and that is actually research gap. So well, I think all of us know what is research gap. But important thing is how to write the research gap. What happens is that I see many students, and sometimes when I review articles, I find that writers, they're jumping to the conclusion that there is no study. Actually, this is not the right way of writing that gap. What is supposed to do? There are certain, style and approach. First, tell the reader what actually studied about that particular phenomenon in previous studies. So in this way, you are telling your reader that you read those articles, you have the knowledge, and you have that capacity to criticize now. And also you're giving credit to those, the pioneer researchers who work on it before than you. And then once you highlight what is being examined or studied in past, then you highlight the deficiency. And it's not enough. You have to go another step forward. You have to tell your reader that why this gap is so important to study. Because maybe that gap was not addressed just because it was not important. Who knows, right? So you have to establish the need. So we just look at one example. I've taken it from one published articles, just one paragraph. There is a growing recognition of customer satisfaction as a critical construct in marketing in general and consumer behavior in particular. As a result, substantial research interest has been generated in the area of customer satisfaction, consumer expectations, consumer attitude, consumer intentions, redressal seeking activities, complaining behavior, consumer perception, etc. So what that author are doing, they're telling whatever is done before. Then, however, there is a dearth of research examining that what happens to customers after they have switched with regard to satisfaction and loyalty to the new firm. That is the gap, definitely. And then they started to say why it is important. And understanding of how these customers groups differ in their attitude and behavior towards the firm provide crucial insights for designing and implementing effective customer acquisition and retention strategies. So that's the right approach of highlighting a gap. We cannot just simply jump into the conclusion there's a gap. Okay. Well, another thing, we also need to be careful about adherence to the academic writing style. So that is, it happens that sometimes we just simply overlook it. Some students, they're so good in their thought process, but when it comes to academic writing, they are not so careful. On the other hand, some other students, their English is so good and their writing is not so good, but maybe they cannot think critically. So we need to have a combination of all those things. We cannot just simply good in thinking process and bad in writing, or the other way around. Well, so now Thies and Zawaki 2006, what they have said, it is a writing style that fulfills the purpose of education in a college or university. To be considered as academic writing, you need to follow several do's and don'ts, but these do's and don'ts may vary based on your institution and journal requirement. Well, so there are plenty of style and things to be addressed, but I just pick a few. For example, one of these is adopt justifying approach rather than declarative approach. This is very important because most of the time what happened, I learned most of them, but many times it happens that students, they just tell what they're doing, but they just forget why they're doing. For example, if you're saying that, I want to use judgmental sampling. I want to use convenience sampling. But you also need to tell the reader why it is so. So it is not enough to tell the reader what you are doing. It's also important by being an researcher, a responsible researcher, that you need to tell why you are doing so. Another thing is to justify based on logic and not by emotion. So of course, for example, I give you example. Let's say I want to study the halal issue in restaurant. So now, if I want to say my reader that I want to study halal in the context of restaurant service just because I love food service, it will not work. But if you want to say that, okay, in let's say Malaysia. So in Malaysia, there are three kind of races. So we have Muslims, we have Malay Muslim, we have in Chinese, we have Indian. So Malay Muslim, they're very particular and conscious about the halal issue, and therefore they go when they go to the restaurant, so they're very much careful about it, and it is a huge issues. So therefore, I want to study halal in restaurant sector. So that is the thing. We also need to reasoning out with by logic, not by emotion. Another thing is that make a conclusion of your discussion, explain your stand. Sometimes we write so many things, sometimes the students write long pages and then paragraphs and then finally no conclusion. So the question is, so what? Okay, you've written so many things, we know this and that, so what's the point? How it is related to your study, how it is related to your research? That's also we need to know, how to show the conclusion, your own explanation of conclusion and your own stand. Another thing is that flow and smooth transition. That's very important, though sometimes some of us we overlook. Actually, when you write, first of all, English is not our mother language. So therefore we have certain uncomfortableness or lack of proper wording choice, or sometimes it doesn't come to mind on the same time. But it's okay, you read, you write, you put it for a while and then you read again. So when you are writing first time, you are so much enthusiastic, you're too much into it, so you cannot see the mistake. So once you close it for a while and you open it again, then you are a reader, you are not a writer, and then you can possibly find out the flaws. Follow the proper referencing style. That's very important. And different universities, different requirement, and different journals, different requirement. So you have to follow that particular requirement. Use appropriate linkers and phrases. That's another important thing. For example, we need to know, if you do not read, you never know. So those things you can do by reading basically. You can, when you're reading, you're picking up unconsciously, you're picking up, sometimes consciously. When I first started to write my papers, I can remember, I used to write down, jot down. If I like any linkers, I have a pen and paper and I just jot down. So it helped me a lot on that time. So now it came automatically, because when you continuously write, those things automatically you inherit. So like in addition to like nevertheless, however, nonetheless, and you need to know when to use what. Okay, so the more you will read, the more you will gain those actually understanding and exposure. One example here, okay, for example, about the flow and smooth transition. So if you read this paragraph, I taken from one manuscript actually. In pace with the progression of economic growth, we had reached a common understanding that marketing trends and activities had undergone vast changes since the past decades to cater to consumers' behaviors and buying patterns. Globalization is one of the major reasons for the improved economy and advanced technology today. I'm not reading the next sentence. The question is, how does consumer behavior and advanced technology linked here? Not so clear. So authors couldn't make it clear how the first sentence is linked to the second sentence. We read another examples from the same manuscript actually. With the emergence of m-commerce to e-commerce in our lives, consumers are more dependent on online sources to gain information of the products they want to buy. Hence, it is important that business firms provide the useful content of the product to attract customers. How these two sentences are interconnected, moreover, the idea seems incomplete. So perhaps if we look at the second sentence, maybe we can rewrite and write in this way that hence it is expected that if the firms provide useful content of their products in order to allow the customers to buy as per their preference, may result in attracting the customers to remain loyal. So what happened here is that idea all the time in our mind, but when we into write it and express our ideas, then a lot of problem comes. So what we have to do, we just need to write down, then we have to put it for a while aside, and then again you have to read carefully, but like as a reader, not as a writer. Okay. The last thing I want to highlight, not last thing, second last, this avoid plagiarism. So since many of us, the Asian researchers, our mother tongue is not English, so sometimes what happens that when you read articles, we find that, oh, this sentence is so close to my mind and I do not know how to, change it or how to paraphrase it. So then sometimes maybe unintentionally we just take it into write up and then we forget to change it. So that is actually seen in academic world. So we have to actually know what is plagiarism. And there are a lot of definition you'll find. I just taken the simplest one: failing to properly quote, cite, or acknowledge someone else's words or ideas with an internal citation is plagiarism. So citing other researcher's work without giving him or her credit, that's a plagiarism. And quoting word for word without quotation mark, also plagiarism. Note that it is important to know that merely changing the word is not enough. If you just use the right click of your mouse and just change it with the synonymous word, that's not enough. And it's not applicable for well-known terminology. For example, loyalty, brand loyalty. I cannot paraphrase it to intention or retention. It will be different meaning. So for certain terminologies and acronym, don't change. That's not plagiarism. Okay. Right. This is one Turnitin. Many universities and journals, they use Turnitin, but many they use different software as well to catch the similarity index. How it looks like. So for example, I taken it from one of my students' paper. I mean, before she submits somewhere. So I was just checking myself. So 36% plagiarism can be detected, and you can see the online sources all appearing here. So this one is actually referring to the source number 1, and all the colors indicating that, okay, these are the things actually coming from that particular source. So now the question is, how we can overcome this problem? So there are two actually well-known ways to overcome it. One is use of quotation mark, and another is paraphrasing. So what happened is here, I taken one example for some Chuak et al. So this is one paragraph I'm not going to read. It's already more than an hour. So this paragraph actually, how I can avoid the plagiarism. Let's say you reading this paragraph and you're feeling it's so close to your heart and you need the information to write in your article or your own write-up. So first option, you can just put quote unquote, but in that case, you must put the page number to show that, okay, you're very particularly taken from that particular author in this page. Or else you can paraphrase it, but as I said, you're merely changing the synonymous, using synonymous words is not enough. So the second example, it is actually just merely changing and just synonymous word and try to make a little bit here and there, just adjustment. It's not enough. What you're looking for, take the idea and rewrite. So possibly you just need this information that individuals are responsible for their activities in regard to contributing to the environmental pollution, and that's it. You don't need to write every single sentence. You just need the idea. So that's how you can actually avoid plagiarism, similarity index. Well, the last thing I want to discuss that the common mistakes that we usually spot in students' writing when you're reading the literature review chapter, not only the thesis, of course, when you're reviewing manuscript, also you find this kind of mistakes. For example, lack of proper components. What they're writing, it is just like clueless. Lack of relevant content. So they're writing a lot, but maybe it is not particularly focused on the topic or problem or the research question. Lack of flow in writing, I already showed you an example. Sometimes they write a lot, but when they're jumping from one paragraph to another, one sentence to another, there's no link and very difficult, hard to understand what they're actually trying to say. Lack of theoretical discussion for doctoral dissertation, yes, it is a must component, most of the universities, because we are looking for, a greater level of understanding and knowledge. Lack of proper justification in developing a study hypothesis. So sometimes, we read the manuscript or the thesis or proposals that, yes, the students, they're developing hypothesis, but justification is not appropriate. Lack of critical review, sometimes it's just like merely reporting facts, sometimes it's just like summarizing each articles, but it's not critically reviewed. Lack of integrity, not linked with conceptual framework, and plagiarism. Well, so these are the references, actually the books I taken to, maybe more than this actually, but these are the things very much I like those books too much, and those very much useful, and anyone you can download and you can try to buy or get one copy for you. And happens to be there's one book that's actually Dr. Farazan already told that I published with my co-author to Dr. Jihad, Crafting Literature Review, a guide for doctoral students. So actually it is a second edition, came out this year. We are looking for third edition, inshallah, this year again. So this is the link. If any of you interested, you can contact it to me, or you can contact Dr. Jihad. So we discuss here more than what I said just now, because this is a little bit concise form of many things, and just give you a glimpse shot of it. But there are, of course, a lot more to discuss about it. So we talk about what is literature review, then how to find relevant articles, and mapping your articles and summary tables and all those things, searching the research gaps, talking about the phenomenon of interest, critical thinking, reading, writing, role of underpinning theory, discussion of study variables, hypothesis development, conceptual design, and make it worthy to this academic writing, actually, basically. So, well, if anyone happens to interest, just drop me an email. I'll be very happy to attend your email. And with that, thank you. Okay. Now, Dr. Farazan, maybe we can.
Yeah, there are a couple of more questions on where you answered the questions earlier, and then there are a few more questions which are coming through Facebook Live. So I don't know if you're going to answer them now or in an email, but if you have a few minutes.
It is already late night here. It's going to be approaching 1 a.m. Okay if I respond to email?
Yeah, of course. So I would just tell everybody, since it's 1 a.m. in Malaysia, and I'm already very thankful for you, in sharing your knowledge at this time. Please, for those of you whose questions are not answered, please do not mind it. I would really recommend you to send an email to Dr. Farazan, and she'll be very willing to answer your questions through the email. All right. And for the copy of presentation, I don't know, you can email her, but this whole webinar would be recorded and it would be available online, so you can have a look at it online. And if Dr. Farazan wants, she can send you a copy of it if you email her.
One thing I must say that usually I do not share my PowerPoint slides, personally. Yeah, they can just see it, anything like, they can just watch it in online, and that's it.
All right. So thank you very much, Dr. Farazan, and thank you for all the participants of the webinar. We'll update the website with the video recording of this webinar, and you can have a look there. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Dr. Farazan.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye.